Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mick and Jens. And this one, we're going to do an astrology video again. So I will give a little bit of an introduction on Australia, and then Mick is going to launch into the topic of Australia. So it's going to be very interesting. First, I wanted to say a disclaimer first before we launch into the topic, is we both don't know a lot about Australia. Of course, we know some things. We read up on it. So we're both kind of going blind into it, but I think that's a good thing, because if Mick can go blind into the astrology, that's a great thing. So welcome, Mick. How are you?
I'm doing very good, and I'm so excited that we're finally doing a video on Australia, the astrology, and some of our own just general interpretations. You have some really cool things to share, and as a Canadian, I feel quite an affinity with Australia, both being Commonwealth countries. So I know we have a lot of people from Australia that watch our channels, and they've been asking us, when are you doing an Astrology of Australia video? And we're here. So very, very happy to be here with you and everyone else today.
Yeah, so before we go on, as a lot of you might know, we're organizing spiritual retreats. So we're doing one in Canada, actually, very, very soon. It's almost filled up. How many spaces are there left, Mick?
I think we have 1 or 2 spaces left.
Yeah. So we've got one or two spaces left for our soulful summer solstice retreat weekend in the beautiful Canadian wilderness in Algonquin Park. So it's going to be amazing, meeting like-minded people, freedom-loving people, spiritually minded people coming together in this beautiful nature setting. I'm very excited. We'll be flying back to Canada soon, next week, to get prepared for this retreat. So, and also don't forget, I can't forget, I have my book out, World in Transition. It's out on Amazon. It's available all over the world, also in Australia. And I've seen actually that I had a few Australians buying the book. So, if you're watching, thank you for buying it. And I hope you enjoy reading it. So check it out. The link is in the link tree in the description of this video. So so I said we're going to go blind. So, and I think it's a good thing to go blind, because you don't have any prejudice, Mick, towards towards Australia, right? We don't know that much about it. And do you think do you like doing blind readings in astrology? It's like just like you don't know nothing and you just go in and do it?
I like it and I don't like it, because I'm a Scorpio and I like to know all the information about something. So there's a part of me that gets kind of freaked out by looking at a chart that I don't really know that much about, especially a country, because there's so much to have to do with the country and the people of the country. But I also get excited by it at the same time. So I will say the things that I do hear about Australia, mostly, and I do know some Australians close to me, but mostly comes from the Rebel News Australia channel. I love Rebel News. They have an Australian chapter of their channel. And also there's an astrologer that I really like from Australia called, what's her name? Kazanya. So sometimes I listen to Kazanya's videos and sometimes I hear her talk about Australia, but it's never been a country I've really looked into historically or astrologically. So I'm excited to get into it.
All right. So I'll talk a little bit first about Australia from our perspective, because we are not Australians. So, it's down under, as they say. For us, it's on the other side of the world. And of course, me and Mick, we are coming at it from a freedom perspective. So, we are freedom fighters, freedom lovers. We spoke out against what happened, during the quote unquote health crisis of, 5 years ago, which was, and I want to go in a little bit in about that. So in Australia's current political climate, we had Scott Morrison in power during those COVID years, and Australia was known for very, very strict lockdowns. I mean, I saw these horrendous images from Australia, these immense lockdowns, which I will go into in a bit. And then we had the new government now. So after the COVID years, so Anthony Albanese and the Labour government came in. As I said, I don't know a lot about these people. And what I heard recently in the news is this tweet, and I'm going to show it to you guys, is that he was dining in a very expensive restaurant with Dan Andrews. Now, Dan Andrews, I know him because I've heard a lot about him during, COVID with the lockdowns and stuff. So there's this tweet here that I'm going to share with you guys. So he was drinking on taxpayers' money, and a lot of Australians were kind of disgusted by it because, he flies in with his jet, which is just all paid by, the taxpayer. And stuff like that. Dining with Dan Andrews. Now, Dan Andrews, as I said, I know him because he was known to introduce like the strictest lockdowns and the longest lockdowns in the world during COVID. He put Victoria, which he was the governor of, he put it in lockdown for 260 days in total. So that's like almost close to a year. And they named him Dictator Dan. And I remember these videos coming in from Dan Andrews, like, really going, I have to say, full fascist. It was full fascist. And there was a lot of Australians also. There was, of course, also an uprising, a lot of protests in Australia. Me and Mick, we also went to protests in Europe against the COVID years. So this is the guy, Dan Andrews, and when preparing for our video, I immediately recognized his face again from 4 years ago, where he was really and he was being labeled a dictator, rightly so, in my opinion. Also, let me play you this little clip here to kind of set the stage of an Australian talking about the lockdowns under Dan Andrews.
We're not allowed to travel more than 5 kilometres from our house, even to get groceries. We try to order groceries online, particularly Western Sydney here, which is facing the worst lockdowns, where people can't go to work unless they've had the jab. And you try to order groceries online and they're inundated. So we're in a really difficult situation. We previously had a rule where there was what's called a singles bubble, where you can go and see your friend if you don't have a partner. Now that's changed as well, where you have to actually register one person only that you're allowed to visit, and that person needs to be known.
So it goes on and on and on. Remember how crazy it was. You can only go like 5 kilometers from your house to get like food, and then you have to register who's coming. I mean, this was it was worse like where I lived in Belgium and Canada. But this is crazy. And some people might say, okay, you this is old stuff. Why do you keep bringing this up? But we have to keep bringing this up, right? Because this is very, very important. We have to learn from history. Do you agree, Meg? Do you because some people think like, okay, this is just, they don't want to talk about it anymore, especially people who are more, into the mainstream. It's like, it's over. Well, let's not discuss that anymore. What do you think?
I think we need to keep the discussion going, because I think it's important to learn from history so that we don't repeat history. It's interesting how, and I know as an astrologer, because I have to study the history to see what happens during certain transits, and then when we have them coming again, we tend to repeat history, right? Unfortunately, whether that's for the bad, in some cases for the good, I guess that's a positive thing. But, not only that, is it important for us to remember our history so that we don't repeat it. Also, we have like a bunch of people, potentially most of the people or half of the people on the planet right now, that still don't see the severity of what happened because we were so heavily mind controlled and brainwashed. Right. So I think it's important to keep the conversation going. Like Jens and I, we're a married couple, and we have some people close to us that in recent times said, oh, it wasn't that bad. And, oh, you guys could go to a restaurant. You weren't locked out of the restaurant. So there's some people that they just don't even realize through the experience what actually happened, especially for those of us in the freedom community that resisted the mandates. Right. So I think it's absolutely disgusting what we went through, and we cannot allow it to happen again.
Absolutely. And, Australia, like most governments on earth, was totally in bed with these globalists. I mean, this is a clip here of Bill Gates saying, in reference to the harsh Australian lockdowns, and listen to what he's saying here.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe it's possible to prevent the next pandemic?
Say again?
Is it possible to prevent the next pandemic?
Yes, if every country does what Australia did, then you wouldn't be calling it a pandemic. That's all.
See, so yeah, this guy's of course deep in bed with it. He's pushing the product that they released. It's we all have to follow Australia's example. Of course, that was like really, really harsh. So anyway, another thing I want to quickly show is this thing, talking about the product that Bill Gates pushed, the thing they put in your arm that everybody had to take, or they couldn't go to a restaurant and you were excluded from social life, from going to your sports club. I mean, it was funny. They said, take it for your health, but then if you don't take it, you're not allowed to go to the sports club like they did in Australia. You were not allowed to go to the gym. It's insane. So let me play this clip here. And this is a clip that I saw 3 years ago from Australia, from an Australian woman called Casey Hodgkinson, and she was damaged by the product that they released, and it's still on YouTube. And I invite you. And when I watch this, I'm going to be honest, it is a real tearjerker. When I watch this, I cried. I cried because it's very, very emotional. And let me show you a little bit. I'm not going to turn the sound on. Of course, it's better with sound. There's music on the video, and we don't want YouTube to give any reasons to take this video down because there's music on there. So let me just add it here. Let me just play it. So see, normally you hear the sound, you hear her fists, and so she got her first dose of, the product you're seeing here on the screen, and then she got totally damaged. She has a nerve damage, so she has been in, like he said, she has been in a wheelchair ever since. Absolutely, it's an amazingly gripping story. And like it says here, she tells the story of how in Australia she went to the doctors, and none of the doctors want to help her. They don't want to admit it's from the product they put in her arm. And you see her life, you see her boyfriend helping her. I mean, and it's a very, very emotional interview, and I really recommend watching it. Even 3 years after the date. So a girl in the prime of her life, a beautiful girl, named for life, as so many others have been named. And this, it's important to show these personal stories, because when we hear the stats, it's just stats. But when you see a personal story like this, you really know the human tragedy that is behind all this. So really recommend it. So Casey Hodgkinson and Liz Gunn, it's still on YouTube. And then last thing I want to mention before I give Meg the stage for the astrology is I want to mention Michael Rhodes, because he was an Australian. He was an emigrated Englishman, but he lived for a long time of his life in Australia, and he was an amazing spiritual teacher. And I learned a lot from him. I visited him multiple times. He did, intensives all over the world, 5-day intensives, which were always amazing experiences. I went to a lot of his talks when he was in Holland and Belgium. So this is him with his wife, Carolyn. He passed away last year in April. He lived in the Gold Coast of Australia, I think, or the Sunshine Coast, they call it. I did an interview actually with Carolyn Rhodes, his wife. It's also on my YouTube channel if you're interested. And his books are amazing. So it's spiritual books, metaphysical books. And then last word, we're going to talk about Uluru, because Mickey, we were talking about it, that Uluru was his power spot, right? Because we've been to power spots, like we have organized retreats to power spots. Maybe we should do Australia one day. What do you think?
That would be amazing. I'd love to.
Yeah, so a little interesting story I want to share about the Uluru, because they say it's a really sacred place for the Aboriginals. And I remember one time I was doing like a remote viewing exercise, for fun. And they give you for people who don't know what remote viewing is, they give you like a coordinate, but you don't know what is behind the coordinate. And then you have to try to psychically remote view it. So I got a coordinate. I didn't know what it was. And I was trying, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling like a vortex. I'm feeling like a chakra. What is this? This is like a wormhole. And I was feeling a wormhole. Like I say, okay, my final answer, it is a wormhole. And when it was revealed to me, it was this. So I think I was tuning into the vortex aspect, because these sacred spaces are like wormholes, are like the chakras of the earth, right? So it is being said that Uluru is one of the chakras of the earth. So it's also a very magical, mystical land in Australia. So with that being said, let's launch into next dissertation on the astrology of Australia. I'm very curious what you will be able to point out. I don't know where you want to start, maybe with the chart itself.
Yes, definitely. And I so resonate with what you just said, Yenzi, that it feels like Australia is a very magical and sacred land. And, I find it really interesting that the British monarchy, has colonization of some of these very magical lands, right? Australia, New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, I think New Zealand is a Commonwealth as well. Is that right?
I don't know, but I think so.
I feel like that. Canada, also, some of these places that there's something very, and I mean, there's magical places all over the world, but, places that have real wilderness, right? There's a real wildness to them, sacred quality, Aboriginal people that have been living there for, such a long time, which I know is all over the world as well. But very interesting astrology chart for the country of Australia. Now, I want to say that I'm using the chart of January 1st, 1901. This is the date that Australia became its own country, but still in the Commonwealth. And I'm using the exact time of 1:35 p.m. Sydney time on January 1st, 1901. I heard this from the astrologer Ksenia. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Ksenia. She's a great Australian astrologer. You can check her out on YouTube. So she said, based on her Australian sources, I heard her say one time in a video that the signing ceremony was at 1:35 p.m. Sydney time. Before I even get into the birth chart of Australia and also the transits of Australia, I just want to talk a little bit, Yancy, about how these overarching themes astrologically right now of freedom and independence and unshackling from parasitic slave systems. I think we see this through the planet Pluto, transformation and power being in the sign of Aquarius, which is the sign that literally rules independence, freedom, separation. Last time, of course, we had Pluto in Aquarius in the late 1700s was the American independence, the French Revolution. So, I'm getting chills when I'm about to say this. I feel like this Pluto in Aquarius, we're going to see Australia and Canada and other Commonwealth countries becoming free. Again, history repeats itself negatively, but also in the positive sense. We've also, as we're filming this in 2025, have Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Aries, even though that is the planet of war, the sign of war and conflict and divine masculine, can be quite intense in its own right. Aries is the other sign in astrology, other than Aquarius, that we associate with independence, freedom, and sovereignty. So in the collective astrology, in particular from 2025 going until 2028, when all together we'll have Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, and Saturn in Aries, there's an overarching theme of the whole world of many different countries stepping more into freedom, sovereignty, and independence. So I think Australia is going to be a part of that. I think Canada is going to be a part of that. I see that in their transits as well, which I will get into. And I also want to acknowledge that Australia and Canada, where I'm from, have many similarities. Okay, very interesting, just in general and also astrologically. So in general, we know that they're both Commonwealth countries, which can I just say, and some people may get pissed off, they get pissed off every time I say this. Most people that listen to our channels, they agree, but sometimes there's people that get really triggered by the fact that I say Commonwealth countries are not free. I'm not going to go into the whole spiel because I feel like I've already done that multiple times. But if you actually look into the history, if you actually look into what it means for Australia, Canada, these Commonwealth countries, they are not independent countries. The person in charge is the reigning monarch of England. You can easily see that on Wikipedia. They are constitutional monarchies, meaning at the end of the day, the king is in charge, or the queen, whatever is the ruling monarch. So I'm not going to get too into that. That is the facts if you actually look into your history. So the facts are that as of right now, Australia, like Canada, is not a truly independent and free country yet, right? So they're both Commonwealth. Also, Australia and Canada are both Aries risings. Isn't that interesting, Yancy? They both have an Aries rising. Aries being one of the two signs, as I said, with Aquarius that rules freedom and independence and sovereignty. So it's a part of the path of both of these countries to step into honoring self, being an independence, not taking any bullshit from especially a monarchy system. So interesting that these two countries have similar paths. Another similarity is Australia and Canada both have very strong Neptunian influence in their birth charts. For Canada, it's very intense because Canada has a whole Pisces stellium. Pisces is the sign ruled by Neptune. Canada has a 12th house stellium. Canada has Neptune in top aspects. But for Australia has Neptune 27 degrees in Gemini, exactly in an opposition, exact aspect to its natal Mercury, also Neptune in a strong opposition to the natal Jupiter and Chiron. Jupiter and Neptune are the two ruling planets of Pisces. So why is this significant? Well, Neptune, yes, it's the planet of spirituality and creativity and the healing arts and healing systems. It rules a lot of positive things, but it also rules some pretty challenging things like lies, illusion, brainwashing, mind control. Okay, Neptune in opposition to the Mercury, to me, that can be lies about the history. Okay, lies about the documents, lies about what the written word of what the country is, right? Neptune in opposition to Jupiter can bring confusion about the country, confusion towards the people. There's a similarity between Australia and Canada where, and I'm saying this as a Canadian, I don't mean to diss the Australians because it's the same in Canada. The people are confused and they may not even realize it, and the country doesn't even make sense, right? So these countries, many of the people, since these countries' inceptions, for Canada, it's been since 1867. For Australia, it's been 1901, sorry. Many of the people think it's a free country. Yay, I'm in Australia, it's free. Yay, I'm in Canada, it's free. Yay, I'm in whatever other Commonwealth. No, it's not, right? Is there anything you want to speak to with that point, Yenzi, before I go forward more into the birth chart? Like the importance of realizing you're not actually in a free country and how most of the people still don't get that yet?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying about, the history not being totally correct or things being covered up in the history. And what I had to think of is like something that is in my book, like how the Aboriginals were treated in Australia. Because basically, it was like a little bit with the Native Americans in the Americas, how the Aboriginals, and I remember, I know from my book, there's something called the stolen generations in Australia, where Aboriginal families were just taken, and the eugenics practices of the elites, where Aboriginal people, children, were taken from their family forcibly by police. I mean, I present a picture. I recount a testimony in my book of a kid who was taken away from his mom and dad, an Aboriginal, placed in foster homes where they would re-educate them. Really horrible tragedies that happened with the Aboriginals. So yeah, I think that's interesting that you're referencing that hidden side also.
And Canada also has the hidden side. I don't mean to keep bringing Canada up, but just saying astrologically, they have that similarity of, we don't learn that in schools, in Commonwealth schools, how horrendous the treatment of the Indigenous and Aboriginal people were. And that's a really fucked up part of our history that we're going to have to heal through, right? Big time. So, also, when it comes to the birth chart of Australia, so Australia this is wild, you guys, a 10-degree Capricorn sun. Now, 10 degrees is a Capricorn degree. So Australia is a double Capricorn on its sun with the ruling planet of Capricorn, Saturn, at home sign in Capricorn, conjunct the sun. So why is that so crazy? Well, Capricorn rules success, power, government, authoritarianism, law and order. So of course, that makes total sense astrologically that with the pandemic, we saw Australia was arguably, okay, let me know in the comments what you think, but from what I've personally heard, arguably the most intense country for their lockdowns, right? I mean, Australia had, I had some notes here. Let me just bring this up. Just one second, you guys. If what my research is saying is correct, there were over 6 lockdowns in Australia with 262 days of lockdowns, travel limit of 5 kilometers from your house. We didn't have that in Canada. Did we have that in Belgium? Was that in Belgium?
More strict than Canada or Belgium.
And of course, they would try this in Australia because Australia is an island. Yeah. It's the perfect place to test something like this out. Right. And Australia, and unfortunately with the astrology, there's an authoritarian influence. So this is a country that can experience heavy experiences of authoritarianism. Right. So, but it's really interesting because there's a moon exalted in Taurus. The moon loves to be in the sign of Taurus. 20 degrees, which is a Scorpio degree. So to me, that's saying the people are going to wake up. The moon represents the people. Scorpio is to wake up from the lies and the BS of what's been going on. The people are in a powerful position, actually, in this country, even though there's very authoritarian psychopaths that try to do crazy things. And look at the amount of Sagittarius in the chart. Look at all that. Chiron, Mercury, Jupiter at home in Sag, Uranus, Venus, North Node, Vertex. Wow. So even though that's in the 8th astrological house, which is the house of Scorpio, death and rebirth. So this is likely to be a country that will go through a death and rebirth. I think that's through leaving the Commonwealth system. Very positive influence of Sagittarius and Jupiter and Sagittarius. So there's actually luck, divine luck and positivity on the side of Australia and its people, which is kind of trippy because it is a Capricorn sun with Saturn in conjunction to Capricorn. And Sagittarius rules foreign people, foreign allies. So, I don't think Australia is ever going to be a place that gets completely disconnected from its allies. There will always be help and support available. And if something did go into a really fucked up place, I don't think it would be allowed to go forward, because this astrology is showing me there's always a connection with the foreign friends and the foreign allies. So I think that's good astrologically, considering it is an island, right? And it's very far away from places like North America, one of its allies, places like Europe as well. Also interesting that the midheaven of Australia is Aquarius, okay? And the midheaven is very important, you guys, in a chart, because it's the top of the chart. It has a huge influence over the whole rest of the chart. Has a lot to do with the purpose of the chart as well. And again, Aquarius is freedom and independence up of the higher consciousness. So in the birth chart, I actually do see quite a few similarities with Canada going on, indicating that in the coming years, I think we're going to see both countries become free. And Australia, I was doing some research and I did see Australia did do a referendum, I think in the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken, to leave the Commonwealth, and most of the country voted no. I don't think Canada has ever done that, but I think we're going to see that again at some point soon, for sure. Anything you want to interject, Jens, before I go into some other of the transits?
No, I'm really fascinated by this chart because, as you say, I of course, I'm not an astrologer. I only see it when you point it out to me, but the heavy influence of Sagittarius and Capricorn is very, very interesting because they're like two signs that are next to each other, right? But Sagittarius is also about travel, right? And it's actually a country that has been discovered by travelers, by explorers, right? So it's very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of foreign people in the country. That's very correct. So also when we get into the current astrological transits, let's take a look at that here. Wow, they've got not normal astrology. Sometimes I like to use that saying. This is like ding, 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 not normal astrology. This is very powerful and intense astrology at the moment. One of the biggest factors is Pluto, now beginning its transit in Aquarius, is conjunct the midheaven of Australia. Pluto, the planet of death, transformation, revealing, secrets being revealed, power, powerful people, now on the midheaven entered the 10th house of governments, politicians, powerful people being seen publicly. So Pluto on the midheaven in the 10th house is exposing the corruption and the dark side of Australia to the whole world, but also it's exposing the politicians and the government systems. And even though Pluto in the 10th house can bring strength to governments and politicians and kind of those authoritarian overloads, they're being exposed, and especially since it's in the sign of Aquarius. So I don't feel like Australia is going to be a country that's going to completely go to shit. I don't think that's going to happen to any country, by the way, but just saying, I do think there will be some places in the world more intense than others over the rest of 2025, going into 2026, with Pluto conjunct the midheaven and just entering the 10th house. Lots of secrets, Pluto being revealed about Australia. And interesting that Aquarius has to do with social media, the internet. So secrets being revealed through independent journalism, the internet, social media. Well, so that's very intense. And also Pluto at the top of the chart is showing that country is going through a major death and rebirth and transformation. And, Pluto takes over 240 years to go through all the signs. So this is very rare. As we're looking at the chart of Australia, it's got Pluto right at the top of the chart. Anything you want to add to that, Jens? That's pretty intense, don't you think?
Yeah, like I hear your explanation. This is going to be a country that is going to do a big transformation. And maybe a question that I want to ask you is the midheaven in Aquarius. I kind of have the feeling, does it have to do also that Australia is going to be like a forerunner and like futuristic and new technologies, or doesn't have had anything to do with that? Or
Ooh, yeah, for sure. I think as long as Australia has this chart, okay, as soon as Australia does leave the Commonwealth and truly become independent, it will have a new astrology chart. So we'll see when that's going to happen. But in the meantime, 100%, we're going to see, some of these new technologies, AI, all those Aquarian innovations really being played out in Australia first before other countries. And I don't know anything about that. So let us know in the comments, you guys, if you're already seeing that. Because do you know anything about that, Jens? Have you heard anything about them testing?
I have no idea. I don't know how far they are with AI in Australia, or with the transhumanist aspects of it. Because as you said in previous shows, the dark side of the Aquarius is like the high technology of the dark side, like the transhumanism, trying to put chips in people's brains, injections and all that stuff, nanotechnology. So I don't know how far Australia is already in that. Maybe they're far. I don't know. Let us know in the comments.
And this is making me think about, with the collective astrology and the transits of the country, these things are not going to work into the long term. And the harder that these authoritarian figures push, which I think Australia is actually really important for us to be paying attention to. And I'll admit, I haven't, there's just so much going on that for me personally, I haven't been paying too much attention to Australia. But Jens, I think it's important that we need to going forward, because it's kind of like the testing ground of what they want to do to the rest of us. So it's important for us to pay attention to that. But at the same time, I don't want to freak out Australians, because there are some good transits that I'm going to share with you as well. Through this process of the dark night of the soul that we're in, it's waking the people up. It's exposing these dark technologies and authoritarians through that process as well. And some of the good things coming up for Australia is that we now have Jupiter in the sign of Cancer as of June 9th, 2025. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Jupiter is the planet of luck, positivity, abundance, blessing, opportunity. So us astrologers were very happy about this transit. And this is actually going to be very positive for Australia, because Jupiter in Cancer is going to make trines to both the Sun in Capricorn, the Saturn in Capricorn, and also the Moon exalted in Taurus, and also the Mars in Virgo. So, sextiles, not trines, because water and earth are, they get along in astrology. So Jupiter in Cancer, that's going to bring positive upliftment to the people, which is the Moon, the empowerment, and the men, which is Mars, and the overall identity of the country, the overall beingness of the country. Jupiter in Cancer is also transiting for the next year over the third house of Australia, which is bringing luck, positive energy, and blessings to local community, neighbors, local towns, contracts, documentation, social media. So I think a lot of people are going to wake up in Australia over the course of the next year. We're going to have a lot of amazing independent journalism from Australia, a lot of news from Australia. The third house is news and information. So I think that's very supportive to have transit Jupiter over in the third house. And what else did I want to share? Oh, yeah. We've got, as we're filming this, Uranus is at the end of Taurus, but in just a few weeks, on July 7th, 2025, Uranus is going to ingress into Gemini, finally out of his fall position of Taurus in Gemini, and will be in a conjunction to the South Node of Australia. The South Node represents the past lives, excuse me, you guys, what we're stepping away from, what no longer serves. It's a point of release in astrology. Uranus is the future. It's the opposite of that. It's change, it's innovation, it's breaking through stagnation and shackles that don't serve us anymore. So I think as soon as Uranus goes into Gemini, that's on July 7th. I can't remember at the top of my head exactly when Uranus is at 1 degrees. I think that starts, if I'm not mistaken, August or September going into October. Huge positive change and release for the country of Australia. So another big transit. Like these are a lot of big transits happening all at the same time. Really, really interesting. Also at the same time, Chiron, the asteroid that we call the wounded healer that rules our healing journey and the healing arts, is conjunct the rising of Australia. So this is a time of healing, wounds coming to the surface, Australia being seen publicly for that. Chiron is supporting Australia in its healing and empowerment journey. And we've also got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happening this. We're getting the first taste of that summer 2025, although it won't be exact until February 2026, over the 11th house of Australia. Next year, it'll go into the 12th house, really highlighting the medical system of Australia, the health of the people, spirituality, the entertainment arts, what's been going on with secret societies as well. But with that over in the 11th house, that is dissolving, again, ways of technology that don't serve the people, groups, community connections that don't serve the people. So there's a lot of, I see, letting go. There's a lot of death and letting go happening for Australia, as many other countries and people. I'm seeing a theme in the astrology this year going into next year. So if you are in Australia, I hope some of the things that I've shared with you can bring some upliftment, because I genuinely mean it. And I genuinely don't feel that Australia is going to be, under this kind of authoritarianism similar to what's going on in Canada for very much longer.
Wow, really, really interesting. Yeah, there's like, it's interesting how it always is reflected in the astrology. There's like the authoritarian aspect, but there's also, as I've understood, a really beautiful aspect, really positive healing aspects, because with healing comes healing always, and it's healing always includes an acknowledgement of the shadow. Because to heal, even on a personal level, we have to face our shadow. If we want to heal from trauma, the shadow is our trauma, so we have to face our trauma. So I think it's very beautifully reflected in the astrology, even for countries. If we want to heal, we got to face the shadow in the past.
Yeah.
Because if we don't want to face the shadow, we will be keeping locked in to that authoritarian structure. And that's the thing. Some people don't want to face the shadow. Like, they believe everything the government says. They don't want to see the shadow. They don't want to see the lies. And that keeps them in this authoritarian structure. So to break free of it, we have to both see the light and the dark. So I think that was very beautifully reflected in the astrology chart. So yeah, I think we're at the end of this video. Is there anything else you want to add, Mick?
Nothing at the moment, just that I've got you, Australia, in my heart and prayers, and we're not forgetting about you. We're here. We're going to keep talking about you guys. So love you all so much, and thank you for all your support.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Really, all our love to the Australians out there. And don't forget, we have our retreat coming up, Soulful Summer Solstice Retreat, and I can't add it to the stage. Maybe can you do it, Mick? Because it doesn't let me do it.
Yep. Let me remove that and add that.
Okay. So our Soulful Summer Solstice Retreat weekend in Canada, there's only 2 spots left. And also I have my book out. And for the Australians, they can actually get it on the Australian Amazon. If you just click the link in the description from my link tree, you will be automatically rerouted through the place where you live. And for the Australians, that's obviously Australia. So thanks everybody for watching. We will be doing another video next week on Megan Jens. That will be not an astrology subject. So we do like astrology every 2 weeks, and then a spiritually themed or conspiracy subject every other week. So thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.